Charlie, I'd love to start with you and thinking about making the business case. McCain has framed Regen Ag as not just an initiative on sustainability, but a core business imperative. Can you share a little bit about what your strategy is in investing in regenerative practices, particularly with a focus on long-term resilience?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be on the panel with everyone. Agriculture is at the heart of all we do as a company. We've been in business since 1957, and we've really built our business in partnership with the farmer. Our early founders said, if we don't get the agronomy right, nothing else matters. And for us, regenerative agriculture is about getting the agronomy right. So the way we set out on this journey is back in 2017, we did a climate change study. We had noticed in our business that over the history of our company, we would have dealt with 1 or 2 climate events a year. They would have been in different parts of the world, and we would have just dealt with them. But then increasingly, we were dealing with 10 and 15 different climate tragedies around the world, which would have wiped out entire crop seasons for us. So we knew we had to do something. So we commissioned a climate study that would have looked forward to 2050 to tell us where we would be from a climate perspective and the effect of climate on our farmers' business. And the results were startling. So as a result of that, we did set a 100% regenerative agriculture target in partnership with our farming partners around the world. And it's really, for us, it has the benefit of mitigating climate change, but more importantly, it's going to help us build a assured, resilient supply food chain for the future. So that would be the business case from our perspective.
Great. We need a future to live in, and I guess Regen Ag helps provide that. Beth, can I come to you? I mean, everyone in the room knows McDonald's. So you obviously work with very large network of farmers and suppliers. From that farm perspective, what's the biggest challenge? What's a bottleneck in getting Regen Ag or regen practices integrated across a very large supply chain?
Well, I guess I've got to start with the fact that, as a food business, a huge amount of what we sell comes from the farm. And whilst we're a global business, we source an awful lot of our food locally. In fact, our thinking always starts local, and we go global when required. But that means, therefore, that pretty much every single farm is different. So regenerative agriculture is a set of principles and, in some cases, a clear standard, as in the case of McCain's, that's been tailored to the needs of those specific farmers. But in order to be able to set those standards and maintain those standards, we need to be able to take measures. And we need to measure what matters. So measure soil health, measure biodiversity, in order to determine whether or not a farm is truly on its journey to being regenerative. If we're able to put those principles into the hands of farmers, we can enable them to apply those standards, but also to build farms that are more resilient, not just in what they produce for the McDonald's food supply chain, but also from an economic perspective, so they can endure changing weather, they can raise healthier animals, higher welfare standards, and therefore build resilient business models. That sounds complicated, doesn't it? And that's probably one of the challenges. But working with great suppliers like McCain's, where we can build one clear strategic framework, mobilize our supply chain at scale, whilst localizing what we need to do, where we need to do it, that's the way forward.
Yeah, interesting. And so would you say the principles are customized to different farmers, or is it a consistent standard that then is localized a little bit?
The end product should be consistent. Many of you will have visited McDonald's around the world, and we sell similar things. And some products we sell in every single country in the world. Therefore, the end customer experience has to be the same: great value, great tasting food that they love and enjoy. I often talk about the fact that, our Big Mac, I think, is celebrating its 54th birthday. That's one heck of a success story. The famous McFry, produced by McCain's, is sold with 80% of the sales in our restaurants. Delivering a consistent experience is key. So whilst the inputs and approach might need to be tailored, the output needs to always be consistent.
Yeah. Sarah, can I come to you? From a farm perspective, from the farmer's perspective, what are some of those economic realities that they're having to deal with or face when it comes to regenerative agriculture?
So let me give a little bit of context because unlike McCain's and McDonald's, I don't think Alltech is probably as well known to everybody in the audience yet. So putting some context around us, we're a family business. We're a private company founded by an Irish entrepreneur 40 years ago who went to America to make his fortune and did. So that was the magic of it. He had a background in fermentation. He had a background in, I guess, understanding distilling and fermentation and understanding of yeast. And he went to the States and he created a business based on yeast. But that yeast was the new vessel of his fermentation were cows, because how they ferment and digest their food is a next step as well. So he built his business around this natural solution to farmers and built up a suite of different portfolios of solutions in that space. But when we engage with farmers, so the role we play on the value chain is pre-farm gate. So we're supplying, for the most part, speciality additives that will go into a premix, that will go into a feed mill, that will go into an animal, that will go into ideally a processor in McDonald's eventually. So, or similarly to a crop. So that's where we're quite far back on the value chain. And I guess what we're trying to do is have conversations, as we always do with farmers, as we're part of the journey that they're on. But I guess bring back messages from the market to that farmer so that he knows what and she knows what they're navigating as well. And I guess when we're talking to most of them, what they'll say the challenge to us is, number one, the driver of the journey towards sustainability, for the most part, in most markets, is regulation, is policy, and it's the consumer then. So they're the three forces, and they can be volatile depending on the clarity. And when we see barriers for farmers, when they come and talk to us about it, so they've got this push, but the barrier they're telling us is they're not sure of the business model. They're not sure of the return that they'll get and be rewarded for it. They're afraid that it'll cost them money. And they're not sure of the measurements. So to the point that Beth and Charlie were just making, so much of the systems are being built, the standards are being built, and their business is going to be measured against that standard. So what they're trying to do is navigate all of that. And what we're trying to do as a trusted advisor on that farm is then to support them on that by showing this is the measurable impact that by undertaking these activities right the way through your farm, this is the measurable impact that you will get the return on. And what we're trying to do is position this as a value creation opportunity for them, do knowledge transfer so that they know what they're doing on the journey. And I guess so much of what McCain's would be doing will be on the crop side of things, but there's an animal role in regenerative agriculture as well that very often is forgotten. So how do you train to make sure that that animal is integrated into the soil health that we all need?
Very interesting. Yes, I agree that a lot of times the animal side, livestock side is discussed in a very different way, I guess, when it comes to food and ag. Rishi, I'd love to get your thoughts on it as another B2B company on stage. How are you engaging with farmers on regen?
Thank you, Pratima. And it is quite interesting to be on this panel and hearing very different perspectives, but all very aligned. And just to give some perspective and context of who we are, while we are not a name brand that people will acknowledge and understand, but you consume us every day. We are touching everybody's life on a daily basis. We are a global leader in the food ingredient space. We are farm to fork. We bring it in different forms to each one of us. And I'm a CFO. I'm unlike others again. So I'm a finance professional, bring a very different perspective to the whole agenda on regen agriculture as well. Is because our business is all about creating the differentiation on the ground. And if I use some numbers in my explaining what the business is and why this becomes relevant, Pratima, what you said, 1 in 5 chocolate bars will have our cocoa. We would have touched that. We do enough coffee beans around the world to serve 90 billion cups of coffee every year. So clearly we got a role to play. And that's really important because it's not only about, and we've got customers around here that which I meet and we spend time with because they need the right products. And there are people like us who actually are in the supply chain right from where it is either grown or carried through. And if we don't do it right, if we don't have the right practices, And being a purpose-led organization which has very strong credentials around being regenerative agriculture in one of our strategic choices, this can't be achieved. And that is really the whole agenda of that. If people like us and companies like us who are able to be on the ground, work with the farmers, work with the communities, and then have regenerative agricultural practices, if we don't do it, there's no way that the companies and the consumers can get it.
Yeah. Patrick, I'm going to come to you because obviously you're another B2C company, and I do want to open this up to everyone, including B2B companies after Patrick. But obviously, Kraft Heinz has a very long-standing relationship with farmers, but also with consumers. So in your perspective, we've heard from the production farm side of it. How do we communicate regenerative agriculture, or the benefits of regenerative agriculture with consumers so that it resonates?
Yeah, we heard it a couple of times here on the panel also today. You're really going to focus on the outcomes that consumers understand that are very tangible. I don't believe that we need another certification or label or any of that sort. We have brands. These brands stand for certain values, for a certain value proposition, whether it's McDonald's, McCain, or Heinz ketchup, Heinz beans. We're in the UK. They have a value proposition. And as consumer expectations evolve over time, the brands also have to evolve the value proposition. And I don't believe that we need to have, say, yet another thing, another scheme. It's very tangible outcomes like grower income. We haven't talked a lot about grower income, but one of the benefits of Regen Ag is actually grower income, secure grower income over generations. So those are very tangible benefits that I feel we need to communicate to consumers because they understand that.
And do you think consumers, and again, this is for the entire panel, are willing to pay that additional price for increased grower incomes as part of Regen Ag? Charlie, go for it.
I don't think yet. Research shows that less than 10% of consumers in the UK, in Canada, and the US know about regenerative agriculture. So I think the onus is on all of us to communicate that along the way. I think within the value chain, we all need to do our part to train the farmer the right way on regenerative agriculture, but also put the financial tools in place for them so that when they adopt regenerative practices, we do know that there will be a dip in their profitability. How can all of us work to fill that dip before they start seeing the benefits? And we've done that around the world by setting up different financial instruments with different banks. So out of our 3,900 farmers around the world, we have programs for about 50% of them, which is a pretty good thing that we've been doing for the last few years, and partnering with our partners at McDonald's as well through different sustainable farming funds. We've been able to impact real change both in Canada and the UK. So there are little things that we can do along the way. But we're not there yet on the consumer side. We are starting to dip our toe in that, and I'm happy to talk about that a little later, but I can pass it on to our to other colleagues on the panel as well.
Again, our research would say that you ask customers if they want higher welfare, if they want sustainable supply chains. Of course, people will say yes. Then how much are you prepared to pay? And at the moment, people don't have money to spend more. So therefore, as Charlie said, we've got to find a way through financial instruments to de-risk the transition for farmers. But actually, there is some positive news in all of this. We find that in many, many, many cases, the attention to detail that comes with measurement, management, a more rigorous, maybe tracked approach to farming often can drive and unlock greater efficiencies. 100%. So one of the many benefits of regenerative agriculture can be flood or drought resistance. One of the many benefits can be an improvement in animal welfare. One of the many benefits can be a shorter life cycle for beef cattle, so therefore they are slaughtered earlier because of improved feed conversion rates. Now, there are a multitude of potential benefits. All of those can actually drive a positive economic outcome for the farmer. So part of the work that we are doing is capturing those insights and ensuring that we're putting in place learnings and processes that enables us to scale them. So if there is a cost, we can understand the true cost.
Can I jump in there as well, Beth, to add on to that as well, in that the question's around how do you tell the consumer all of that? And I think so much of what we're doing as an industry is challenged in that we speak science. We speak about benchmarks and KPIs and the improvements that we're making. And I know consumers, even when I go home and try and tell my crew at home, it's like blah, blah, blah. And I think as an industry, we have to get much better at the storytelling. In our company, we have a concept of a planet of plenty, which is around the science, the sustainability, and the storytelling. And if we as an industry, beyond just Alltech, don't get better at the storytelling, we're leaving the capturing of value behind. And let me bring to life kind of a mad concept that we did in trying to show an illustration of proof on that space. We've been very, very frustrated as a private company, as I said, with the rhetoric around agriculture. I've said it to a couple of people that lots of people I've met at the conference today and yesterday and the day before, I tell them I work in sustainability, I tell them I work in agriculture, and I get sorry, as if like it's just an impossible job, rather than it being one of the most exciting jobs you could possibly be involved in. And when you think of agriculture, it's very often framed in a good versus bad, eat no beef, less beef, or what are you doing to the environment? And yet so much of that is built on misinformation, not the fact that there is impacts on the environment, but that it's not fully understood, in that if you measure our world just on carbon and not on nature, not on biodiversity, not on soil health, where you need animals to improve the soil, you're missing the picture. So we anyway commissioned a documentary, A World Without Cows. So this is a shameless plug that you do go on the website, worldwithoutcows.com. You won't see the documentary, but you'll see the trailer and the story behind it. But that's an investment in telling the story to consumers. And it's not a party political broadcast. It's actually 40 different scientists allowing people to have a different conversation when it comes to agriculture, allowing them to understand regen ag, listening to farmers telling their stories. And there's phenomenal stories within that, because it's a purpose-driven industry that's there to feed the world, to provide nutrition, income, economics to people. And yet we're very much stuck too often in a binary conversation of show me the KPI and how do you get the carbon down?
Patrick, Rishi, would you agree? Are we just sort of leaning on data a bit too much and taking away from the story?
No, it is. It is. If I go first, probably, and Patrick can share his thoughts too. I think we've been lucky and blessed that Mother Earth did not have a bank account or a cashier. Otherwise, the amount of bills that we would all been getting every day, what we're consuming and using, and not just consumers using, actually exploiting in many ways, would have been enormous. So we can't forget the fact that this has come to us for too long for free as well. But that will change, because if we don't have the right practices, we may not even have a sustainable business or food to eat, and that's the real risk. Are consumers willing to pay or not? There's a question, and I think I would agree it is more about a story, and I'll probably use one example, and because it is one food category that we all eat and enjoy in the current world. Kind bars, you would have heard Kind bars. Mars obviously acquired Kind bars. Kind used to be a customer of ours. They were a small private company to start. Mars was also a big customer of ours. They were acquired. And then they got with us to start what they call the Almond Acres Initiative in California. It was to ensure that whatever almonds go into that Kind bar is all through regenerative agriculture practices. So consumers understand and appreciate that there is something that they're paying for. We also have to appreciate that the farmers and producers can't pay for it. If we believe that the lowest in the value chain will finally pay, they can't. But they are the ones who have to make the biggest impact. Consumers have to understand, appreciate that everybody in the value chain, including not just private companies, governments, institutions, have to play their role. Because there is a cost of doing it. We can't run away from the fact that consumers in the current world, like Beth was saying, that whether it's inflationary environment, consumers can't also pay for everything. They will appreciate, they will understand, and hopefully pay a premium. But everybody will play a role. And if we are able to get the right practices done, we can also improve yields and productivity. And I think, to Charlie's point, that is really where the change happens. If you can't start quantifying those numbers and you can show that there is value in doing the right thing, then the impact is far more deeper.
Patrick, would you?
Yeah, I don't think that we're leaning too much on data. I think we're actually, as an industry, not leaning on data enough yet. We're just getting started on understanding what really happens in the soil. You mentioned productivity. That's one of our beliefs, that a productive farming system is also a sustainable farming system. You just got to measure the right things and then draw the right conclusions. But we shouldn't have to, or we shouldn't put this on the consumer to make those choices. This is our job as an industry, that we collect the right information, we draw the right conclusions, we help growers become more productive, become more sustainable, have farming systems that are more resilient to weather events, to drought, to heat stress. We had a quite interesting 24 season in California when it comes to tomatoes. The water situation in California is not the best, but that shouldn't be the concern of consumers. That should be our concern, how to figure that out, and that's driven by data.
So go ahead,
If
Tom.
I can just clarify, I don't think we should stop using data.
Yeah.
I think we need data. I think we should stop only using data.
Yes.
So it's an and rather than an or, that we need the science. We need the sustainability KPIs, but we also need to tell the story in addition to that.
I think it's an interesting point because we need storytelling and data, but I feel like in the food and ag space, every solution is this and. A lot of times the challenge with the space is it's this. This is the only solution and it's only regenerative agriculture and nothing else. And that tends to kind of, just wind us up a little bit and keep us in one spot versus making real progress. Beth, did you want to jump in?
I am not sure in the over 30 years that I've worked in the food industry that I found a single solution to any challenge whatsoever. So, it's everything is a systems change. And we do need data, and we need more data, and we need more insights, and we need to share that data in a very open-minded way with each other. And that's not just our successes. An almighty failure can be just as insightful, in fact, often more insightful. And what is successful one year, unfortunately, in agriculture can be a failure the next year in agriculture.
Absolutely. And we've been doing this, if I may add this,
Yes.
we've been doing this for a long time. So for us, what we're discussing here, that's not new. We have demonstrated successes that started 15 years ago, where we started working with growers 15 years ago and changing farming system, changing practices, measuring the results, figuring out, does this work financially for the growers? Does it work financially for us, for the consumers? So from my point of view, Regen Ag is really about the outcomes.
Yeah.
It's not the name, not the label. It's really the outcomes that you're pursuing. And we've been doing this, and I'm sure that others, McCain, probably for 50, 70 years, you've been thinking about this. To me, and also for our growers, this is really at the heart of what we do, what we're discussing here.
Yeah, I'd love to actually now, I know we want to have questions as well, but I feel like we're moving to a more positive note, and I'd love for us to be able to share examples of exactly what you were saying, Patrick. You've been doing this for a while. What are some of those examples of success stories that we want to share with the audience?
How much time do we have?
Jump in. We'll give you one round, and then we'll open up to the audience.
I can jump in quickly if that's okay. At the beginning of our journey, we really put the farmer and the grower in the center of this. So we worked with them on what a regenerative agriculture code looks like. Then we did some training, and I think Wayne Honeycutt from the Soil Health Institute is in the room. Wayne really helped us get this up and running from a soil health perspective. Then we focused on financing as well, just because we do know there's an issue with transition costs, working with our partners in the banks and also with partners like McDonald's. And then I would say the final piece is we have committed to 3 farms of the future. 2 are up and running. One is in Canada, one is in South Africa, and one will be in Europe and announced sort of in the coming months. And the reasons why those are important is they are commercially owned and operated farms by McCain. And on that farm, we are trialing regenerative agriculture techniques to prove the hypothesis that they work, and we're bringing our farmers through there, because farming at the end of the day is a show me industry. We're unique in that we work direct with our farmers directly. Our contracts are with our farmers directly, so we have 2-way conversations with them on a regular basis. And it's early days on the farm, but just some examples of what's working. Versus control farms in New Brunswick around the farm of the future, emissions on the farm of the future are down 30% versus the control farms. And yields are still going up as well. So that is giving us a ray of hope that things are working. And to Beth's point, we're failing as well, but that's okay. Because we're failing, the farmer doesn't have to fail and doesn't take the risk and the onus on top of that. So again, early days, things are trending in the right direction, but I think the onus is on all of us to continue to share those best practices as we work to scale this globally around the world.
Love that example of de-risking. Beth,
Like
all
talk
yours.
about beef.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Done fries.
Done fries.
Work away through the menu.
We got the combo right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Post-lunch.
Yeah, if you got your fries, you got to get your beef burger.
Exactly.
And people see McDonald's. Tara talks about the children rolling their eyes. That happens in my house. People talk about, oh, you work in agriculture. Well, people talk to me about you work for McDonald's. Talk to me about what you're doing on beef. And the good news is that we are doing a lot on beef, but also that we have been able to build, first of all, at a pilot scale, and we are now scaling it, a farm and in a number of farms in which we have implemented a broad range of regenerative practices. Again, as Charlie said, starting with some simple measures, starting with the grass, treating the grass like a crop, being very thoughtful about what grass we grow, how we grow it, how it operates, how nutritious that grass is, and how successful that grass is as a crop. Then looking at the animals, taking a standard herd, but moving that herd using AMP grazing principles around the farm. And then starting to measure soil quality, but with really, really simple measures, not so scientific at first, digging up the soil and counting the worms, things that are really easy to understand. Measuring the daily live gain, that's, a very standard measure for a beef farmer. And finding that the feed conversion rate is super duper efficient when we get the farming practices right and when we get the grass right. And then finding that we are able to bring those animals to slaughter earlier in their life. Well, that's a pretty good start. We've been able to drive improvements in efficiencies of a rate around about 150% at the moment. We've also been able to measure soil carbon at a higher rate of sequestration than the level of carbon that we are generating on farm. We've created a community of capability around that farm to capture learnings, to see what we can transfer across a broader church of farmers. And we have learned some really hard lessons along the way. I would say one of the hardest lessons we learned is Tara's point and Charlie's point. We didn't start with a farmer. Remember, I started with the grass.
Yeah.
So actually, we've had to roll back and say, in order for farmers to want to make a dramatic change to the way they farm, you've got to start with them. They've got to be on board. They've got to understand. They've got to buy into it. And they've got to be part of the thinking as well as the execution journey. So farmer mindset, learning, training and engagement is now at the heart of what we do. But we learned that lesson the hard way.
Rishi, can I turn to you?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll probably, and conscious of time as well, that like I talked about our business being global, we are in 50 odd countries, and our sustainability credentials were very clear because it was also important for us, not just for our partners and customers and stakeholders. If we didn't do it right, we didn't have a business at all. And one of the initiatives that we took was in our almond orchards in California, where we were looking at the natural habitat from a different standpoint. And there was a question in your earlier panel on biodiversity as well. So the linkage and the advantage. For many, bees would be a pot of honey, but for us, it was so mainstay for almonds growing. If there were no bees as a pollinator, there are no almonds to consume. And when we put up this natural habitat, one was it helped in regenerating the soil, but what it also did was that gave the bees a natural habitat too. And suddenly the yields and productivity of the bees and our farms just went up. So you can pay more money to work harder, but bees will do what they have to do. And they did it because they were in the right environment. And what we did from a finance standpoint, which is where some of this becomes more interesting on data, what you just touched upon, that can we draw that link of sustainability into dollars and cents? The impacts that you're creating, actions that you're taking can be relatable to people because finally we are all PL driven. We all look at numbers. Is it corporate organizations? For us, it's all about return to shareholders, return on equity. When you can draw that link, you really see the impact being far more proven. And that's where we have actually made far more commitment. So our CS was also here, and his the strategy that we have on sustainability, it was very clear that we've committed to 2 million hectares under regen agriculture by 2030. It's a very bold commitment. But we know we can make it happen. We know it will also create value for our partners and ourselves.
Yeah. As an economist, we love additionality. So that's a great example. Patrick and then Tara, could we maybe share some positive examples and then we open up?
Fries and burgers are great.
Ketchup goes well with this.
Ketchup makes it great. So, joking aside, we have a concept at Kraft Heinz we call supplier-led innovation, where and a grower's a supplier to us, of tomatoes in this case, where we reached out to a grower in one of our supply regions and said, look, we want to do something different here, radically different. The radical difference was plant a cover crop. Sounds, what is so radical about this? But for them, it was really quite the change. It started 15 years ago. What started on one farm is now standard practice in that whole supply shed. We increased their yields by 45% in that same time frame. We bred specific tomato varieties that perform best under those conditions that we found in that supply shed, because we have our own tomato seed breeding program. So Regen Ag does pay. It takes some time, but if you're in for the long run, like we are, like 150 plus years, it does pay off. And if you involve the grower from the beginning and you make it about them, make it about their income, their families. A lot of growers are family businesses for generations. Then you can really change the farming systems.
Yeah, we need to adjust our time horizons in terms of the returns. Tara, over to you.
A slightly different concept that we were looking at, and we work with farmers every single day, but who we possibly don't work with every single day are the NGOs. So we engaged on a research farm with NGOs, conservancy and NGOs that were perhaps not on the same mindset as we were as we started this journey as to the role of animals in protecting soil. So in Florida, we've created a research farm where Archibald Farm, where we're researching and investigating how can we learn so that we can then have knowledge transfer to farmers, but that it's built with a nature conservancy line of sight on that, so that we're building best practice in, because everything we do will be challenged by NGOs who are asking us to do better consistently. So what we're looking to do is build that in from the beginning and then allow us to translate that insight with a farmer-centric approach, to Beth's point as well, to come with better knowledge. And in some ways, what we're looking to do is myth bust, to say that if you put an animal grazing on soil, can you actually capture more carbon than if it wasn't on that soil? And the answer is yes. So when you can build really robust data sets that allow the industry to explore new solutions, that's another approach that we believe is hugely important.
The counterfactual argument. Yes, I see we have a few questions. I'll start with the gentleman there, and then we go there.
Thank you very much. Cedric Porter from Farmers Guardian newspaper. Is one of the barriers to farming more sustainability, farmer profitability? And if so, how can that be addressed?
Anyone want to go?
No, I can.
Patrick.
Yeah, I can. I'm sure you also have. Yeah, in some situations it is, especially when it is more profitable to extract more than you give back. Unfortunately, that in a lot of farming systems is still the case. We try to work with our growers to identify opportunities to not have to do that and be profitable in the long run. Unfortunately, the short-run farmers or short-term farmers, they're typically more profitable if they extract more than they give back. But as I said, we have good examples where the long run is actually more profitable than if you just focus on the short term.
If I can build on that just very, very briefly, we're challenging a little bit the business model of that from the perspective of we've all, I think, concluded that it's really hard to get the consumer to pay for the investment that farmers have to do. And what we're looking at doing is investigating value creation opportunities outside of the consumer, so that if you look at, for example, carbon credits and farmers behaving sustainably, having the proof point for that sustainability, you're separating the value of that work from the food that they're producing and actually putting that environmental service as a separate fund. So in some ways you could say by disaggregating the value of the food or the value of the output of a farmer, there's an opportunity to sell the value creation of sustainability back to the value chain as well.
Just one question there from the gentleman in the corner. And then, great, that's it.
communicate the properties of holistic land management to our government, who would have us cull our dairy and beef herd and import Mercosur beef. I mean, for God's sake, we live in Ireland, the perfect place to raise cattle.
So we're having a viewing of World Without Cows in the European Parliament on the 21st of May, and it's exactly to talk positively about the role of agriculture, so that what we're arguing consistently is that the backdrop that we're having this conversation in is very often a carbon tunnel, rather than looking at the entire ecosystem and the positive attributes that agriculture can bring to the economy. So I'd love to invite you to that viewing of it in Brussels, and we can talk about it there.
Okay, one last question here, because I did promise 3, and then we do have to close. I know we can talk for hours. But
Thank you so much. We're modeling climate change impacts on vulnerable crops as part of our day-to-day work. And I would like to hear some of the practical examples from maybe one or two of you of which adaptation measures you're executing already today, looking into the future for the long term.
one person. Rishi, do you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so I think Patrick was referring to the seeds. So we are also into onion seed breeding. And the simple opportunity or the challenge was, as we can imagine, and we supply onions to likes of McDonald's as well, so because dehydrated onions. So you grow onions, it takes a lot of water. You haul onions, then you dehydrate them. Then you sell it to your customers and they hydrate it back and put it back in their hamburgers or use it in different forms. Could we create a seed which is low on water and high on solids? So essentially what you're doing is, one, being more sustainable. You use less water to start. You haul less water, you are actually hauling solids. You dehydrate lesser, you're evaporating less, and you get more value for the same produce as well. So there are different ways of getting value by being sustainable. So I thought that's in one, and I think seed breeding for even tomatoes are very similar in that way, what Patrick was referring to.
We're way over time, so I do apologize. I know we can talk about food for hours. I will also just say our speakers hopefully are around for a little while outside, so please do feel free to chat to them one-on-one. But thank you everyone for joining us, and please join me in thanking our speakers. Thank you. Thanks very much.